y'all. Welcome to another episode. This is the third episode of the newest season. This season is entitled The Art of the Con. This episode, I want to talk about trauma bonding and supply. So as you know, in case you haven't been following, my relationship ended, my 2-year relationship ended. And the person that I thought I was buying a house with and getting married and just, living the rest of my life happy with ended up being, in my personal opinion, a narcissist. So I can't diagnose, I'm just a person out here reading, going through TikTok, IG videos, Google, YouTube. So I'm just doing as much research as I can on my own because I find the act of what he did to me fascinating. And I find the act of how I allowed him to do this to me fascinating. And just narcissism in general, like if you're on TikTok or Instagram, my God, you're going to see it everywhere, right? So I find it fascinating. Once again, I don't know if he is or isn't. I can share my story with CG and I can share how he treated me and how we interacted with each other in hopes of helping you and in hopes of helping his future girlfriends, because I didn't know it until it was too late for me, but he has a pattern of doing this with females in his past. So I hope I can spare them because it was pretty embarrassing for me and financially straining for me. At this moment, the only thing I'm paying is the car insurance every month. So I'm actually happy with that because it could have been worse. It could have been so much worse. Okay. So I talked about how when we met more than 2 years ago, but when we met at the beginning of our 2-year relationship, I feel like he loved bombed me with the 50 red roses. We hadn't met that, weekend, on Christmas was our first date. He was very public with social media, liked and hearted everything I had on Facebook. Talked to his friends and family's daughters about me all the time. I feel like he elevated me, right? Like he put me on a pedestal. I feel like I was love bombed. I had gifts that he couldn't afford initially, right? So typically what happens, not always, right? Because there's exceptions to every rule, and there's actually up to 14 different narcissists. And then some people are just on the spectrum, right? Like I probably have tendencies, you probably have tendencies, which is what fascinates me even more about this. But the way our relationship began with the 2-year, beginning of the 2-year relationship was with love bombing, right? So I feel like the object of the person, whether they're toxic or a narcissist or what have you, whatever you want to call them, the person love bombing you for the most part does not have good intentions for you, right? So it's a form of manipulation and it starts a cycle, right? So love bombing, is huge. It hooks a lot of people. It hooked me. I had been single for a while, and I think looking back, I was probably in need for that kind of romance, right? Like I wanted to be romance. I wanted to feel like I had met my soulmate, because that was something he was telling me pretty often, like within meeting, which is ridiculous now, but in hindsight, it's kind of what I needed. So I kind of fell for it, right? So once I was hooked, which was pretty quickly, right? So a narcissist or somebody with bad intentions for you will love bomb you. So that way you're hooked, right? And it starts this cycle of really high highs, right? Because, when I was dating other people, when they were healthier relationships, I didn't have this high. I was happy, but I don't mean I had this extreme high, So what happens with trauma bonding is they hook you, right? So there's really high highs and then there's really low lows. And the low lows are a part of the devaluation stage, and they're also part of the discard stage. So these stages, as I said in the last episode, could happen within a day or it could happen with months or a year. It's everybody's slightly different. Everybody's experiences are different. But I can tell you, looking back, my highs with CG were really fucking high and I was really happy. But after a few months, inevitably what happens with someone who's love bombing you, sometimes it could be a few weeks, it could be a few days, right? Because everybody varies. But eventually what happens with love bombing is the mask that they're wearing, right? The facade that they're hiding from you, or the facade that's actually there that you don't see, what's behind the mask starts to crack, right? Because, even if you're a healthy person, right? You're a healthy adultish person. I like to describe myself as adultish, but when you're healthy and you're happy in your relationship and you have good intentions, you put your best foot forward, right? So this is not that. This is different than that, because even when you put your best foot forward, at some point you're going to be like, okay, bitch, this is what I'm really like, but it's not shocking to most of us in healthy relationships because the high wasn't so high, So in my case with CG, the high was really high, right? There was a love bombing. So I feel like looking back, there are signs that I didn't see, right? So I'm not going to judge people, but he's a pretty heavy drinker. Like he passes out almost every night when he drinks, right? I don't, well, at least he did. I don't know if he still does. That's a sign basically of narcissism. I mean, obviously it's a sign of alcoholism, but I never judged him because, I've been in the Army for 15 years. We're very much, or at least my experiences with the Army have been very much work hard, play hard kind of thing. And I'm always a fan of if you're in your own home and you're safe and you're not driving, just like live it up, enjoy your life, right? But that's actually part of a sign. That's part of like NPD, but I didn't realize it back then. So the other one, a good sign about trauma bonding that I like is, do you defend this person even though you know they're wrong? So remember how I told you guys that I found out in October that he started an affair with S in July? Well, when S reached out to me or I reached out to her, it doesn't matter, on Facebook Messenger, she was instantly like, he's a terrible person. What a horrible boyfriend you have, because she had been cheating on him, or she'd been cheating with him on me, right? So she was like, oh my God, Corey's like a bad person. And I saved this message because it was shocking to me, because my first response was, don't talk shit about Corey. Why the fuck was I defending him? The man was cheating on me for 2 months with a married woman with 2 or 3 young kids, and she insults him and I defend him. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? So aside from the fact that I really don't know what's wrong with me, of why I chose to defend him in that moment, it was weird to me because I did a screenshot and I have it, and I saved a lot of screenshots and a lot of text messages and a lot of emails and with this whole situation, because I feel like the story is a little crazy, but it's true. It really happened. It's really my story. And looking back, and I think I chose to defend him because I didn't want to believe that he had been cheating on me all this time. And then the person he chose to cheat on me was actually married. Like, to me, that's even worse. Like, I don't think people should have affairs and people should cheat to begin with, but my God, don't cheat with somebody who's married. I don't know. And then has really, really young children. I was kind of shocked by that as well. But that also goes, which I will talk a little bit more about supply. But anyway, so I feel like with the trauma bonding, if you have really high highs with somebody and really low lows with somebody, I mean, like low to the sense of it questions your self-worth. It makes you feel, they make you feel like you might be crazy if you question them. Like towards the end of our relationship, once I realized that CG was caught and I knew that he was cheating, he said something to me that I'll never forget. And he was like, I don't want to be with somebody who doesn't trust me. Tracy, you don't trust me. And then in my head, I was like, motherfucker, you just cheated on me. Of course I don't trust you. But that's part of the gaslighting and the stonewalling. And that's part of the way that they devalue, which I'll talk about more later. So if you're not sure if you're in a trauma bond, basically, one of my key takeaways is, are the highs too high or the lows too low? Do you defend them even when you know they're absolutely dead wrong, right? Like, I remember once my mom, when I had hip surgery, my mom was like, well, why isn't, because I had surgery in New York and CG at the time was living in Nebraska. My mom flew in from Texas, of course, to take care of me because my mom's fucking awesome, right? But my mom was like, why isn't Corey here? And this was the beginning of our relationship. Like we had been together maybe 8 months or something. And then she was like, because the flip side, Tracy, if he was having surgery, you would do everything in your power to be there. And I was like, Mom, I get that. But, he has kids. Like I was trying to defend him. By the way, he barely saw his kids. So that was even me saying that, I knew that was a terrible lie for him. It was a terrible way for me to defend him because he barely saw them. So it's not like he was picking up from them school is what I mean, like on a daily basis. So she was questioning why he wasn't there. She was like, if this man loves you so much, why isn't he here? You're having hip surgery. And I was like, wow, he's busy with work and, he has kids. His work, by the way, he was driving, copy machines, right? And I found out later, actually recently, a few days ago, I got a message on Facebook Messenger from a man that I'm not going to name, of course. And he sent me a message and he was just basically like, I just want you to know, I worked with Corey in Omaha at this company and he got fired because he was stealing gas and he took the company vehicle places he shouldn't have taken in. And I just want you to know he's a bad guy. Like a lot of us think he was a bad guy. I'm sure he'll be fired soon. I don't wish evil on people, but the reason I mention this is because it's a pattern, right? He has a pattern of losing jobs and asking females for money and the whole bit. Anyway, so I think a heavy use of alcohol can be a sign for a narcissist as well. As far as bonding, what happened with us is we would have the real high highs, right? We traveled to see each other a lot. So every time I saw CG, it was kind of like a mini vacation. So I like to give myself credit and be fair that that's why I miss some signs. It's because I feel like we were kind of always celebrating when we did see each other because, we were long distance. But I can tell you, with the heavy use of alcohol, there were moments where his inhibitions were so lowered. Like I saw the real him, like like behind the mask, right? Like I was saying, behind the facade. And there was moments where he would say things like, he was like, I want to fight you because you're in the army. I want to be able to know that I can beat up an army soldier. And I was like, what? And then I would chalk it up to this man's just like drunk. He doesn't know what he's saying, right? Because who says that, And then I was just kind of like, in my head, I'm like, well, my mom didn't raise a bitch, for one. And for two, like, if somebody tries to attack me, can't guarantee I win, but I will give you everything in my soul to defend myself. So it was just weird to me, right? So I don't know. And then there was one time, because, we traveled a lot. This kind of just goes into a little bit of supply and like the mask, facade slipping. But so basically, narcissists, for the most part, are described as people who have very low self-esteem, right? They have low self-esteem, but they have a feeling of grandeur, right? So even though deep down they don't feel like they have what it takes in order to feel this illusion of grandeur that they have, they use supply. So supply is basically a person that they're targeting. It's most likely their girlfriend, wife, mother, son, child, what have you. It's usually somebody really close in their relationship, right? So narcissists are always described as people who are very sweet and charming. And I have to tell you, if you meet CG, you're going to think he's one of the most charming, funny people on the planet, right? But over time, when that facade began to slip, I would see the weird moments of where I didn't feel like he had empathy or remorse, even to and for his own children. So I remember seeing glimpses of that, and it concerned me, but I kind of just brushed it off, right? So basically what happens when their facade slips, it slips because for the most part, their self-esteem is being hit, right? So basically, for the most part, a narcissist always needs supply. Like I talked about in the last episode, to me, it makes sense that they get this good energy and good vibes and good admiration feelings. They're kind of like vampires, right? So like in the beginning, I thought he was sweet and funny and charming and just like a great catch, right? So I admired him, right? Like I was in love with him, right? So he would take all those good vibes from me and he would feed his ego. And that's where his feelings of grandeur took over, right? Like he felt like he was a cool, special guy because I loved him. And then I found out later, once he realized that I couldn't give him that amount of supply anymore, that amount of huge admiration anymore, because I started to see through the facade. That's when his mask was starting to fall more and more, right? So I know he started cheating at least with S in July. He could have been cheating with other people for all I know, but that's the timeline that to me makes the most sense when I look at it, because right around this time when he started cheating on me with S, the married woman with the young kids, was also one of the first times we had ever worked out together. So believe me when I say I'm 52, I'm going to be 53 in November. I am definitely not the strongest, fittest person on the planet. My personal goal is to get my six-pack back before I die. I'm on my way, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I don't think I'm all that, is what I'm saying. I started CrossFit, 10 weeks ago. I go every week. I average 4 days a week. I love it. I'm eating so much better than I have in years, and I'm feeling good. And, I like the way I look in my jeans or what have you, in my sweatpants. But anyway, one of the first times that CG and I worked out together was in Pennsylvania, because he was working out all over the place. And then we worked out together again in Virginia, right? So within one of these first workouts, we were doing bicep curls, and then he got a phone call, so he left and then came back. And then I was warming up, so I went back to, my warm-up set, and then he was gone. So then I was like, fuck it, I'm going to actually just do my own workout. So I started doing bicep curls, and believe me when I say, I'm not saying I'm all that. But I started curling 25 in each hand, right? So it was just standing, boring bicep curl exercise. I'm just standing there with my music, singing to myself, whatever. He comes back and he has this look of betrayal. And I was like, is everything okay? And he was like, oh, it's my boss with work. I'll tell you about it later. I'm like, okay. And then he was like, how many did you do of those? Because he saw the 25s in my hand. And I was like, oh, I just did 3 sets of 12. And he was just like, how could you do 3 sets of 12 with 25? And he was like, I struggle to do that. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, bitch, I don't fucking know. Like, work harder. I've been working out my whole fucking life, by the way. So it's not like I think I'm all that, right? So I noted in my head his reaction and his look of betrayal. And sure enough, he treated me pretty poorly the rest of the day, right? So we ended up with the workout. By the way, I've made it up to 32 per dump, per hand per bicep curl. Anyway, but it's just me being silly. But I can fucking do 32 in each hand. Anyway, my point is, looking back, without meaning to, I damaged his ego, right? So his ego was damaged. He didn't treat me very well that night. We went through one of those like cycles, like I was telling you, like the manipulation cycle of the love bombing, the devaluation, the discard, right? He ended up discarding me that evening in a sense because he was angry, and I hit his ego and I bruised it without realizing it, right? So the next morning we woke up, we had a great day, but that night was not good because he was just picking on me with things, and then he was like, later in the day, like hours later when we were at dinner, which dinner I was fucking paying for, by the way, and the drinks I was buying for him, he was kind of like, he was like, I saw you got up to like 30 pounds with your dumbbell bicep curls, but I've never seen anybody swing their upper body so much. So that's basically a form of devaluation because he made me question my fitness, right? So whether or not I was swinging my body too much or not, the way that he said it is a form of devaluation because he said that to manipulate me, to make me feel like, well, fuck, maybe I'm not as strong. Maybe he's stronger. That's the manipulation, if that makes sense to you guys, right? That's the manipulation. Those little digs, those little, just hits at your personality make you wonder. And then he blew me off that night, right? Like, we went home with the hotel I was paying for, the whole bit or whatever. We watched a movie, fell asleep, but he was not very nice to me that night. And that was my pen. And that's because of the cycle of abuse, right? So the very next morning, we had a great morning. That's the love bombing all over again, right? So it's like the love bombing, the devaluation, the discard, right? So, and then remember, I'm the term called supply, right? So at this point, I was his main supply, right? So when the facade started to fall, right? When he started to realize that I wasn't in as much admiration or as much love as I had before, because I was starting to see and feel these things on my own. And then, of course, once I realized he was cheating on me, obviously my admiration for him changed a lot. That's when his supply was fading in me, right? So that he had already secured other supply. Most narcissists, by the way, have several supply, right? I like to call myself the main supply, but I may not have been the main supply. I may have just been one of the side supplies, to be honest. And then supply, remember, is just the way that they're getting good vibes, good energy, good admiration. They're getting that from other people because they can't get that within themselves for some reason, right? So the feeling of grandeur comes like in CG's case, for example, he felt grandiose and he felt like superior because he had multiple women that were like, oh my God, you're so cute. Like, oh my God, let's have an affair. That's where it came from him, right? He was manipulating multiple women at a time. I was just one of them. So that's why he felt like, that's where his feelings of grandeur came from, if that makes any sense. He was a vampire with all of us because when we all thought he was cute and funny and charming, that was feeding his ego, right? So that's the term supply, basically. We're the ones feeding the ego, right? I remember, I would say within the last year of our relationship, I noticed that he started saying things like, just in conversation, he was just like, I have a very like self-aware, situational awareness mind. He was just like, I always know where north is. I always know where south is. I was like, I always know if there's a threat coming up, He used to carry, like open carry a couple times, which, I grew up in Texas, so that never really impressed me one way or the other because fucking everybody carries in Texas open. But anyway, but he would say things like, I'm always preparing for the worst. He's like, I have a bug out bag. And he was always like, I'm always aware, he was like, I'm a problem solver. My mind just works because I'm a problem solver. And it didn't occur to me until much later because he lost his wallet like once, and like he lost literally everything. I had to help him navigate to get a new birth certificate, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, but he would also lose AirPods. He probably lost 6 in the time that I knew him in 3 years. And I remember once I was giving him shit because, I'm in the Army. All we do is talk shit to each other. He was like, he said something in conversation. We were together in the same room. And then he said something like, well, I have a very like situational awareness, strong mind. And I was like, yeah, but where's your wallet? And I thought I was funny as shit. He was pissed. Anyway, then I was like, "Where's your AirPods?" Because I love to talk shit. He got mad, right? And then he got angry. And this, of course, he went through the devaluation, started insulting me, and then discarded me, blew me off that night. But it's true though. But the reason I point that out is because if you hear phrases like that, like for the most part, I think he was always saying he had good situational awareness. And I think he was always saying that he was good in a crisis and he was a good planner for the future. I think he said those three things to me periodically because those are three things that he wanted in himself. Like he wanted to be that person. So I think that's why he always said it. So that's another thing that narcissists do, right? Like one of their common phrases is like, but I'm a nice guy. I love pets. And that's some of the tricks that they use to reel you in, right? I'm not saying that every nice guy out there is a narcissist. I'm not saying every guy that loves pets is a narcissist, but that was always CG's thing. He was always like, but I'm such a nice guy. Because I think he wanted people to believe that, because if I believed he was a nice guy, then that filled his ego, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I hope this makes sense. I hope this is helpful to you. Supply is basically just a way for narcissists to reaffirm their importance in order for them to feel good about themselves and their self-esteem, right? So trauma bonding is a cycle. It's a terrible cycle. It gets you hooked, right? Trauma binding to me is probably the thing that I see and hear the most, like on TikTok and YouTube and Google. And I get it because it's kind of like a Stockholm syndrome, right? Like you don't realize when this happens that you're in this cycle. But I have to tell you, if you notice that your friends and family are trauma bonded to some piece of shit out there that's treating them like shit, whether they're a narcissist or not, and that person's always defending them, that's a good indication that they are in a cycle of somewhat, right? It doesn't have to be a narcissistic, abuse cycle. But I have to tell you, trauma bonding, that's fucking abuse. That's manipulation. That's like a form of control and it's insidious, right? So for me, in my case, everything started with love bombing, right? So I would go through these cycles like I tell you about, right? The love bombing, the devaluation, the discard, and then it would start all over, right? Because remember, in my case for 2 years, the highs were high, the fucking lows were low, but I didn't realize it. So I'm here in hopes to help you, right? I'm here in hopes that you help others, and I'm also here just to tell my story. My story is embarrassing. It's becoming less embarrassing over time. The more I read and the more I get good comments and feedback from you guys, even some of the bad comments I get, it helps me realize that it's okay if you fall for this, but it's not okay if you allow this person to continue, one of the negative comments I got was basically like was talking about how, I can't, claim he is. And remember, I've never claimed he's a narcissist. I don't know if he is or not. I can just tell you my story. I can tell you all the reading and YouTube studying and everything that I've been doing and talking to my friend who's an actual therapist. There's definitely no coincidences in life, right? Some of his behavior patterns fall right in line, with what they're saying with the love bombing and the trauma bonding and the supply and the discard, the devaluation, and then just the way, like when his self-esteem was injured, the way he behaved, like, when I was, teasing him about losing his wallet, and then when I was bicep curling more than him, like all of those were ways that his self-esteem was injured. And instead of being, in my opinion, a normal, healthy, I shouldn't say normal, but being an average, healthy person, instead of being like, holy fuck, I didn't realize that I'm dating somebody who's so strong. My female, girlfriend here, is lifting more than I can lift, and in some cases the same that I can lift. And that's fucking awesome. So instead of him being proud of how much I could bicep curl, for example, his self-esteem was injured and he was mean to me. Right. So that's basically because his self-esteem collapsed a little bit, if that makes any sense. So if you fall prey to any of this, or if you know anybody who falls prey to this, my advice will always be the same. Take a step back. Is this person that you're with in this relationship, is this person making you feel happy and elated and full of energy? Or is this person depleting you financially and emotionally? Because I have to say, towards the end of the 2 years, especially the last year, like once I decided to co-sign on that truck, I started to feel exhausted and depleted because I felt like I was always trying to spare his feelings. Like I was kind of walking on eggshells a little bit, especially after that bicep incident, because he was really mean to me the rest of the day, right? So I was really conscious from that moment on because I loved him, right? I didn't want to hurt his feelings. The next couple times we worked out, by the way, I always pretended to lift less weight than I could because I didn't want to get in a fight again. But that's a form of fucking I was being manipulated, right? Who does that? Like bitch, if you can lift what you can lift in the gym, fucking do it, because that's good for you, but I was pretending to be less strong because I didn't want to hurt his feelings, right? I didn't want to damage his self-esteem. I wanted to keep the relationship going because I was trauma bonded. I was always in search for the next high, right? So that's what they do. The love bombing is the high because they want you to continue to give them all sorts of admiration. You're their supply, right? You're the one that's feeding this vampire, basically, right? You're giving them all this energy, all this praise, all this admiration. Their self-esteem goes up. When you damage it by accident, their self-esteem gets injured, damaged, and they start to devalue you, and then they discard you, and then the cycle starts again, right? So I'm here to share my story, and I'm here to share what I have learned. I find NPD fascinating. The next episode, I'm going to continue to talk about it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about stonewalling and gaslighting because this is how they devalue. So I hope all of this makes sense to you. If you have any questions, you know where I am. I'm always going to be here for you. And that's it for today. And